Coming up today, South Korea issues a full military alert along the western border following confirmation North Korea planted landmines that seriously injured 2 South Korean troops. A productive day at the National Assembly. Lawmakers pass a slew of economy-related bills and resolutions to shore up the country's defence against infectious diseases following the recent MERS outbreak. Plus, Dutch investigators say parts found near the crash site of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 in eastern Ukraine could be from a Russian-made surface-to-air missile system. Stay tuned for these stories and more.
Hello and welcome. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, August 12th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to our early morning edition of Arirang News. We start with the sharp uptick in inter-Korean tensions. The South Korean military has been put on full alert along the country's western border with North Korea. Troops are on the lookout after Seoul identified North Korea as the culprit behind last week's landmine explosions at the border. And that's not the only step the South has taken in response to the callous attack. Kim Hyun-bin starts us off.
The South Korean military has issued an alert on the country's western border, following the Defense Ministry's announcement Monday that North Korea was behind the recent landmine explosions that severely wounded 2 South Korean troops. Defense Minister Hammond says the South Korean military will intensify its operations along the demilitarized zone.
We will not be daunted. We will conduct operations to seize control at the DMZ.
Han also confirmed that South Korea Monday afternoon resumed its previous policy of blasting anti-Pyongyang propaganda across the inter-Korean border, and is reviewing other follow-up steps it can take. This marks the first time South Korea has cranked up the loudspeakers since the 2 Koreas agreed that Seoul would stop in June 2004. North Korea has yet to issue a response since the broadcast resumed, but in 2010, when the South said it would restart the speakers in the wake of North Korea's sinking of a South Korean warship, Pyongyang threatened to fire on the speakers. South Korea's defense ministry said on Tuesday that it will counter and destroy the source of the attack if the North decides to fire on the loudspeakers. Responding to the latest spike in inter-Korean tensions, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon urged North Korea to respect the armistice agreement and engage in dialogue to ease tensions on the peninsula. In regards to the probe into the landmine blast, military officials say North Korea may have planted the mines ahead of a possible incursion into the south. The North might have also been trying to derail an annual round of military drills between Seoul and Washington, slated for next week. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, the South Korean soldiers who were the first to respond to the blasts at the DMZ have been sharing their harrowing recollections of the day, seeing 2 of their brothers-in-arms struck down with life-changing injuries. The troops say they now feel a stronger sense of pride than ever before. Connie Kim reports.
These are the faces of the young men who were among the first to respond when 2 staff surgeons were seriously injured by North Korean landmines last week. The 3 soldiers held a press conference Tuesday at a military hospital where they're receiving psychiatric treatment along with 5 others who were at the scene of the explosion. Recalling the urgent situation when 1 staff surgeon first stepped on a mine, Surgeon Chung Kyo-sung said numerous drills helped him.
I instantly yelled, "The enemy shell is dropping." My only thought was to run to the injured troops because that's what I had to do.
Chung added that the chaotic situation, while tragic, also strengthened and reaffirmed comradeship.
While I was treating the sergeant injured in the second explosion, he was telling the first injured sergeant to stay awake.
The trauma and wounds from the bloody landmine explosions are still raw, but the soldiers are already looking to return to normal duty.
I feel ready to return to my division and carry out operations.
A determined 2nd Lieutenant Moon Chi-jun, who immediately called for medical support after the blasts, said North Korea will have to pay the consequences.
I feel like going back to the accident site and destroying North Korea's guard post. Just as our troops suffered, I am looking for an opportunity to retaliate.
It's a heavy sentiment shared by many South Korean troops along the front line. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geunhye has expressed concerns about North Korea's growing nuclear ambitions. In a meeting with visiting British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond on Tuesday, she said Pyongyang continues to rebuff denuclearization efforts despite international momentum following Iran's nuclear deal. During the talks, Hammond strongly condemned the North's landmine attack in the DMZ as a violation of the two Koreas' armistice agreement. President Park vowed to keep applying pressure on the North with a strong deterrence. As for Seoul's relations with Japan, ahead of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's upcoming war anniversary statement, President Park stressed their ties will move forward so long as Abe upholds Tokyo's past apologies. Turning now to South Korea's National Assembly, and the jam-packed August extraordinary session got off to a good start as lawmakers passed several bills to help the economy get back on track. Geunhye reports.
Lawmakers passed a handful of long-pending economy-related bills into law at the National Assembly on Tuesday.
We were able to pass bills to improve the people's livelihoods. We will do our best to make the August extraordinary session fruitful and to avoid political wrangling.
The bills include measures to ease regulations on construction of new public housing in urban areas. There is also support for projects to build high-tech industrial complexes and accompanying business incubators that will bolster fledgling startups and venture enterprises in Korea. Lawmakers also voted on resolutions to overhaul Korea's disease management system and conduct an audit of government agencies overseeing the MERS outbreak. Apart from that, lawmakers also deliberated over a motion from the Justice Ministry to arrest a lawmaker accused of influence peddling. Park Gi-chun, who left the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party on Monday amid the allegations, is suspected of receiving nearly $300,000 in illegal political funds in exchange for aiding a businessman. MPD spokesperson Lee Yeon-ju said party leaders would give the motion careful consideration before making a decision. Park's arrest is subject to parliamentary consent, as sitting lawmakers are immune from arrest while the assembly is in session, and the matter must be put to a vote within 72 hours. Although lawmakers did make some progress on Tuesday, they still have more contentious issues on their agenda for this session, including conglomerate and labor market reforms and a series of allegations against the spy agency. Kim Young-gip, Arirang News.
The chairman of the country's fifth largest conglomerate, Lotte Group, has issued yet another apology to mitigate the growing negative sentiment against the retail giant. He's also vowed to make an effort to increase transparency and restructure the group. Kim Min-ji reports.
The chairman of Lotte Group has issued another apology for the escalating family feud over control of the Korea and Japan-based conglomerate. Shin Dong-bin's apology comes as the Korean public turns increasingly impatient with the ugly family fight, which has exposed weaknesses in the group's management structure and prompted a government probe.
We failed to put in much effort to improve our governance structure and boost transparency. We'll reform agendas that have raised concerns among Koreans, the government, our shareholders, employees, and contractors.
Shin said the group will resolve 80% of the problems with the group's complicated cross-sharing holding system within the year. He also pledged to list Hotel Lotte, the de facto holding company of the group's operations in Korea, in an apparent move to make the firm's management structure more transparent. Shin also emphasized that Lotte Group is a Korean company, saying sales from Korea account for more than 80% of the group's total sales. The remarks seem to be aimed at countering the widespread anger against Lotte and steering nationalistic sentiment. Meanwhile, Japan's Lotte Holdings will hold a general shareholders meeting on August 17th, which is likely to help determine who will head the sprawling company. Lotte has been mired in an ugly succession battle as the founders' two sons, Dong-ju and Dong-bin, struggle to bolster their grip on the group, the country's fifth largest conglomerate. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Russian missile parts have been found near where Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 crashed in eastern Ukraine last year. Dutch investigators say the parts could provide more information about who was involved in the crash. The downing of the flight last July killed all 298 people on board, most of them citizens of the Netherlands. The discovery marks the first potential physical evidence related to the disaster. However, the team says it's far too early to conclude that there is a connection between the components, possibly from a Russian-made Buk surface-to-air missile system, and the crash of MH17. Russia denies any involvement in the crash. A full report on the criminal investigation is due by the end of this year. Now, on the heels of very concerning economic data, China has devalued its currency, causing the yuan's biggest one-day loss in 2 decades. The Chinese currency was purposely cut by 1.9% on Monday. China's central bank says it was part of steps towards currency reform. Up until now, the country has been trying to keep the yuan strong. It wanted to boost domestic consumption and make it easier for companies to invest overseas. So analysts say that rolling back this policy is a risky step. Investors must now decide whether to sell or hold on to the currency. Some analysts believe the devaluation is aimed at propping up China's flagging exports, which slid 8% last month. And China's unexpected decision to devalue its currency sparked losses on European stock markets. Germany's DAX index dropped 2.7%, while France's CAC 40 index slid 1.9% lower on Tuesday. London's FTSE 100 fell 1.1%. Now, the weaker yuan also affected crude oil prices. Brent crude tumbled 2.5% to slightly over $49 a barrel. That erases most of the gains made in the previous session in late May. US crude for September delivery also plunged as much as 4.2% to around $43 a barrel, its lowest since February 2009. 5 former Japanese prime ministers have raised strong opposition against a set of national security bills that seek to expand the role of Japan's military overseas. According to Tokyo-based Kyodo News Agency on Tuesday, a group of some 50 former Japanese journalists asked former national leaders to join their campaign against the contentious legislation. Of the 12 former prime ministers who were asked, 5, including Naoto Kan and Tomiichi Murayama, expressed their will to participate. Naoto Kan is urging Abe to resign, saying he's not qualified to be the prime minister of a democratic country if he violates the constitution. Murayama sided with Kan, adding that they can no longer tolerate Abe's attitude that disregards the voice of the people. Now, a collection of maps that prove Dokdo is Korean territory has gone on display at the National Assembly just days before Korea celebrates its liberation from Japan 70 years ago. Park Ji-won reports.
You can see about 90 maps from Europe, Korea and Japan dating from the 16th century to the 20th century. The Dokdo Foundation and the National Assembly Special Committee are co-hosting the exhibit. Japanese historian Norio Kuboi has been collecting the maps for about 30 years. He says historical documents clearly show Dokdo is Korean territory. Korea's 2 eastern islands, Ulleungdo and Dokdo, are clearly marked on this map of Korea from the early 18th century, proving the islands are Korean territory. This map, made in 1895 by a German scholar, also shows Dokdo, then labeled as the Liangkor Rocks, as belonging to Korea. The rocks are shaded in light purple, the same color of Korea on the map. Japanese maps also prove Japan did not consider Dokdo its territory. Japan made this map in 1811. Neither Ulleungdo Island or Dokdo are outlined with any color, indicating they are not Japanese territory. This official map by Japan's Interior Department in 1880 did not include Dokdo as its territory. Another map from 1905 identified the 2 islands as Korean territory. Kuboi says after conducting its own research, he became convinced Dokdo belongs to Korea.
The Japanese government has named Dokdo as Japan's Takashima and ordered Japanese teachers to say it belongs to Japan, but I couldn't teach wrong facts.
Kuboi says the Japanese government has never released these documents, but relies on a few unorthodox documents to prove Dokdo has belonged to Japan. He has even received death threats from far-rightists in his own country over his work to prove Dokdo is Korean territory. But the fearless scholar has not backed down. He says he wants people to know the true history.
As a historian, I'm convinced Dokdo is Korean territory, and I think it's wrong that Japan teaches its people that the island belongs to Japan.
The exhibition continues until Thursday at the lobby of National Assembly members' office building. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a great day, and thank you as always for tuning in, and we do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.